Yes.
Currently, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security eat up 40% of our federal budget. And in 2025, those programs plus the interest are going to take up all of our federal revenue. So I got to know, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about entitlements as President of the United States?
We have got to restructure those programs such that rather than making people totally dependent upon them, we restructure them to help people to help themselves. Secondly, some of those programs need to be block granted to the states. In other words, states are closer to the problem. States have a better idea of how to manage their funds. See, when we try to micromanage programs from the federal government, they do not work. We've got to allow the states to do what they do best, and that is look out for the citizens in their state. So we've got to restructure. I didn't say just tinker around the edges. We've got to dramatically restructure those programs.
Mr. Cain, let me push you a little bit on some of these things. And now, look, I was a governor for a little piece of time, so I'm glad you have that much confidence in the states. I'm not so sure I do. Medicare actually works pretty well. It's more costly than we need it to be. There's not enough revenue there. Are you willing to say that we should means test Medicare so people who are wealthier actually don't get all the benefits that they would otherwise get? In other words, if you can afford to pay for your health care, you got to pay for it. That's what I thought I heard you saying you can't be totally dependent on these federal programs.
I could go along with means testing, but Elliot, this is part of how we've tried to solve the problem in the past. You can't pick one little small thing and say you're going to do that. That needs to be done along with a host of other things once you get into it, once you restructure it, where the states have more authority and responsibility and freedom to do what they do best. Means testing is something that I believe that the American people could go along with, but only if they agree with a lot of the other changes that need to be made.
Mr. Cain, you're talking about we shouldn't just tinker around the edges, and I totally agree with you. So we're talking about the right thing, at least, entitlements.
Yes.
But right now, Republicans and Democrats in Washington are talking about cutting either $61 billion or $100 billion from discretionary spending, something that amounts to 16% of our federal budget.
Right.
Is it worth it? Is it worth a government shutdown over something that makes up such a small piece of our pie, or should we put the conversation back on entitlements?
It is worth a government shutdown
Really?
if it comes to that, yes. Now, I'm not recommending it, but it is worth it, and here's why. The political dynamic in this country is changing. This is what this whole Tea Party citizens movement, as I call it, is all about. They can't continue to tinker around the edges. Now, here's what I would have done differently. You can't just go in and attack everybody's favorite pet project. No, I do what I call, like I did in business for 40 years. If you really want to cut stuff, you've got to identify whole programs to cut out. That's the only way you're really going to make some big changes in terms of what we have to get rid of. Just tinkering around the edges, taking a little bit here, a little bit there, that's not going to solve the problem that we face.
Mr. Cain, in that case, give us a few of those programs that are big enough to matter. So, I'm not talking National Endowment for the Arts. I'm not talking about everybody's got their favorite target. Give us something big enough to really show up that's a material aspect of the federal government's financial statement that you would eliminate in entirety.
I can't say I will eliminate it, Elliot, because, see, it's my approach to problem solving that I'm promoting here. In other words, for example, take the food stamps program. I support keeping the food stamps program, but I also believe we need to figure out where the abuse is taking place. I also support a lot of the other programs, but see, the problem that we have run into is that they have not, most of the time, identified the right problem, set the right priorities, put together the right plans in order to cut out whole programs. To basically just say, I'm going to trim a little bit over here, this is why we have not been successful at doing that. If we systematically make sure that we're working on the right problems, that we're setting the right priorities, and that we've got the right people working on it, then we'll be able to identify those cuts.